But I want to go back to a story I brought you yesterday when I showed you a report about the future and what it holds for our children. It's compiled by the World Health Organization, UNICEF and the medical journal The Lancet, and it's pretty alarmist and pessimistic. It said, despite dramatic improvements in survival, nutrition and education over recent decades, today's children face an uncertain future. Climate change, ecological degradation, migrating populations, conflict, pervasive inequalities and predatory commercial practices threaten the health and future of children in every country. Pretty depressing and misleading stuff was my view yesterday, so let me bring in an Australian academic who contributed to the study. Liz Hanna is a senior fellow at the Australian National University with a particular interest in health and climate change. Liz, in the history of the world, have we ever seen higher levels of health and education in our children and longer life expectancies?
Australia or globally? Are you asking specifically here? Globally, no. We've and that's what the report highlights, is that we have made globally fantastic gains over recent years in terms of reducing child poverty, improving their nutritional status, survival rates, and certainly increasing educational levels, and with great gains in terms of girls' education.
Yeah, absolutely. This is why it confounds me. Yeah, this is why this study just confounds me so much, because it is so clear in a factual analysis of the data. It is so clear that the children of the world have never had it better. That's not to say, of course, that there are not children who are in poverty and we don't need to always improve, but we've never had better indications when it comes to the life expectancy, educational opportunities and health opportunities for our children. Yet this report is so pessimistic.
Well, what the report outlines is that the new challenges are threatening these great gains. So they're trying to make sure that governments are aware of that and accommodating that in the way they move forward to make sure that we can continue these gains, because, as we all agree, and particularly on your previous interview, how that everyone really cares for children, and anything that harms children elicits outrage, quite rightly so.
Yeah, quite rightly so. I just want to whiz through a little bit of the data here, because I've pulled some of it out from reputable websites here. Let's have a look at literacy, for instance, first up. Globally, as recently as 1940, you've got illiteracy here in the red and literacy in blue. Back in 1940, only about 40% of the global population was literate and 60% illiterate. Now it's more like 87% literacy, so illiteracy down to 13%. That shows the global advances in education. And then when you go to life expectancy, you can see back at 1900, at the start of the 20th century, life expectancy globally was 32 years. It's risen to 72 years globally. The yellow one in the middle there is the world figure. And just to finish the trifecta, let's look at poverty. And this graph shows various measures of global poverty. But since 1900, when almost 70% of the world was in extreme poverty, that's down to now less than a quarter. And in 1980, you had 44%, almost half the globe, living below $2 a day. That's now down to less than 10%. How could we possibly put a negative or pessimistic spin on all of that?
There's no attempt in this report to put a negative spin on that. What they're doing is looking forward and saying that the new emerging sort of environment that people and children are living in threatens to reverse some of those gains. And that's particularly, they mention climate and some of the advertising that's engineered specifically to entice children to, have diets that are high in sugar, normalising drinking alcohol, normalising betting, and they were specific areas that Australia was highlighted for doing very, very poorly in.
But I mean,
and we should be doing better.
But I mean, seriously, Liz Hanna, this is a world and a country where we're seeing kids getting educated, getting great health care, living longer, so much prospect in store for them and their colleagues, and you're saying it's all doom and gloom because there's sugar in their drinks?
No, I'm not saying it's all sugar, all doom and gloom because of sugar, but Australia is in the top 10 in terms of intake of sugary drinks per child capita in the world. We also know that and this is very high, and we've also got 25% of our children are overweight or obese. That rate is increasing. We also know that high levels of obesity and high sugar intake increases your likelihood of diabetes, obesity, heart disease, renal disease, eye disease, having hip replacements and joint replacements in later age because you're carrying all that extra weight.
Sure, we all want to be healthy. We all want to be healthy. We all want to be healthy, Liz Hannah, but the data says they're all living longer. So whatever you want to say about you're keen to introduce a new tax on sugar, I mean, this is just doomsaying on what is a positive story for our children and, in fact, children around the world.
Yeah, but I mean, those particular stats are repeating what the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare has been saying for many years, and that's if we continue on this high sugary diet, then we're getting, more obesity, and so the gains that have happened in the generations that didn't grow up eating high sugary diets, those gains are probably going to start reducing, and that's not good. But either way, I mean, we're celebrating the gains. We just need to make sure that we continue the good path.
You see, my point here is exactly that, is that you're not celebrating the gains. This is not a report about hope and prospects for the future. This is a report that says terrible things about our world and our country. I want to quote you. This is you quoted in The Australian. Decades of willful neglect of the environment and the erosion of compassion have transformed the lucky country to an international laggard that is failing its children. My goodness me, I better immigrate with my kids to New Zealand.
A lot of people are. But the thing is...
They're all coming from New Zealand to here. Now, why can't we celebrate our gains and continue to spread prosperity and health and education around the world, as we've obviously been doing for the last 100 years?
Yes, but as I've said, we are celebrating the gains, but we're risking the future because of our climate. I mean, we rank 7th worst in emissions per capita.
Yeah, just below the US.
Fivefold over the targets.
Did you notice what the top 10 countries were when it came to sustainability? Would you like your children growing up in Burundi or Chad as compared to Australia?
Countries without economies don't have emissions.
Exactly. This is my point.
That will always be the case.
Exactly.
If you're a failed state and you have no economy, you have no emissions because no one's doing anything.
So if you want, if you want good
really
healthcare,
high levels of unemployment.
Yeah. So if you want good healthcare and good education and long lifespans, you might want to have an economy.
You can have economy without emissions.
Is that what it's all about? Is that what's driving the doom and gloom in this report? Getting everybody depressed about climate change that we're yet to see the downside of?
The greenhouse gas emissions were a major component of that sustainability index because we know that the increasing, climate mayhem is affecting, our agriculture, our water supply, our air quality, all those things we really need for
you're saying it will.
Health.
You're saying it will, but of course the climate experts would tell you that the drought is not directly linked to climate change, so we'll have to wait and see on all that.
Oh, it is.
Well, no, not according to the climate experts. The drought is not directly linked to climate change.
They do.
Well, I'll refer you to Professor Andy Pittman of the Study for Extreme Climate Effects and just check up on that. But we are out of time.
And he clarified that.
Yes, he inserted the word direct. He says there is no direct link between the drought and climate change. No direct link. That's the exact words. I've got to go. I'm sorry. Thanks so much for joining us, Liz Hannah. I appreciate it.